Yep.
actually. Something like
Yeah.
that,
Can't
yeah.
wait for some turkey and some pumpkin pie and what
Mm.
else?
Oh, sweet potato.
That
I
sweet
love sweet
potatoes with the
potatoes, dude.
marshmallow
Yeah,
thing
I love sweet
or
Oh,
potatoes.
whatever that thing's
I like them with
called.
the brown sugar.
stuffing. Oh my
Stuffing.
gosh, stuffing. I could go to town
You
on
love being
stuffing.
stuffed, don't you?
I love
Double, double stuff.
double stuff.
Oh
Anyways,
man. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. It's November 23rd at 9:01 a.m. But I have to say, Danny got it on the nail today. He started us at 9. It's just a minute's gone by already.
Yeah, it goes so
How are
quick,
you
but then
guys
that last
doing?
minute takes
Like,
forever. I don't get
yeah.
it. Yeah.
How's your week? Oh, we already have a bunch of people in here. Look at that. You guys been
yeah,
coding a bunch this week?
this week I've been struggling. There's
Oh,
so much stuff that I want to do, and it's just I can't
Not
get
enough
through the
time.
stuff that I'm working on right now, and
yeah.
yeah, it's troublesome.
Yeah.
It's the worst,
Struggle
right?
bus.
There's just like, I feel the same way. There's so many things I want to do, and you don't want to rush through things either. So it's like, you just got to keep putting things on that list, and it keeps getting
Yeah.
longer and longer
I
and
Yeah.
longer.
know. Yep.
I've been hustling this week. I've got a lot done this week, which I'm
Oh,
pretty happy
I got
about.
a ton done this week. Yeah, it was a
Good
really
morning,
productive
everybody in
week.
the comments. We got Randall Lapointe, Chris Rowe, Robert, good morning. Bryce, good morning. How are you guys? Let us know what you worked on this week. What'd you guys do? I know Bryce was working on Python again. Love affair is continuing with Python.
Never
What else
ending.
did you guys do?
You
I've been
gotta love
working
it though,
on
right?
rebuilding my Cover Better app, which has
Yeah.
been quite fun and
Yeah.
doing some UI design. Got some auth set up yesterday, so pretty cool.
Yeah, I just got my better essay app deployed, doing some testing and production before I start doing everything else. But yeah, it's looking
Nice,
good. It is
very
fun,
cool.
dude. And there's nothing best than nothing beats like when you first deploy it to and get to see it live. It's awesome.
You know
And
what
it's
does beat that? When you
oh,
get
when
the
you get
first
paid. When you get
payment.
paid too is
When
awesome. Yeah,
somebody who
paying is
you
good.
don't know is like, "Here's money."
Hmm.
That's a great feeling.
Yeah. But
It is.
Charles,
talking
Next.js
about
crash
Bryce and
course.
Python, I was
Finished
actually thinking
FCC
about
music
him.
app. Nice. God, sorry. I'm just reading what people are doing this week.
I was saying, talking about Python, I was actually thinking about Bryce this week because I was doing some server-side template injections. And
Nice.
yeah, you can they were doing some Jinja stuff, which is integrated with Django and Flask.
It's their
And
template
I was
language.
thinking
Yeah.
about him. I was thinking about almost sending him some of that because that would be fun for him to mess around with.
Yeah, that would be fun. I helped Bryce yesterday with some Python code. He was struggling to get an import in some of his code. And this is something that I actually learned yesterday. So I'm just going to share it with the group because it's cool. So there's this feature of VS Code that sucks where if you have a folder with another folder inside of it, and the only content in the parent folder is the child folder,
Hmm.
then not Next.js, VS Code does this thing where it makes the folders compact. So instead of showing like a nested folder inside the other, it just shows like the folder
Next
name
to each
slash
other.
something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or one's underlined. Yeah.
And that was I think the issue that Bryce had was he was trying to import and he's like looking at them and didn't realize that there was a nested folder and it's very confusing. So I was like, I've gotten used to this over the years of coding in VS Code, but I bet you there's some setting, and I looked it up yesterday. There is. It's called, if you go to your settings, it's called Explore Compact Folders, and if you disable it, then it just always makes the folders show as nested
Oh,
instead of.
that's a good thing to learn though. See, dude,
I know.
this is the thing though, it's funny is like it doesn't matter how long you do this, there's so many settings and tools on
Oh my God.
all these freaking things
Yeah.
that we use
We should
that
just
it's
do a
like,
whole
Dude,
YouTube series on every VS
dude,
Code setting.
well, I was gonna say,
well,
dude, the one time I was the one day I was looking through their settings and I just started looking, I was like, dude, there is so much stuff in here. And then you can do like custom configuration with the document and stuff. Like it
Yeah.
just it's absurd. It's so much, yeah.
Hmm.
I learned something kind of like that with developer tools not too long ago, where if you're looking in there and you're looking at the source code
Hmm.
in developer tools, not view page source, and it has like everything already collapsed. And so I used to go through and I would hit every down arrow, and it took me forever to open the darn thing. And then I figured out on a Mac, all you have to do is hold Option and hit the first down arrow, and it uncollapses all of it.
Dang.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty useful.
The more you know. There's
I
so many
mean,
shortcuts like that where it's
oh, there
like
are.
we've done things. I mean, this happens all the time inside the web dev incubator group where somebody's like doing something and I'm like, hey, you could just like
Yeah.
do that, right? And they're like, dude, I've spent like years of my life like uncollapsing folders or whatever it is.
It makes
But
sense though, because there's just all these people build these options and for convenience, but you don't necessarily come across them unless somebody tells you. Because like unless you're gonna read the entire documentation, but who the hell I mean
yeah,
VS Code, it's like there's so much stuff in there. Like who's gonna do that?
yeah, it's
Too
true.
much.
Randall Lapointe said he's been working on his portfolio this week
Nice.
and he needs to get on my level with framer motion. You do, man. You do. Framer motion is
I
legit.
like framer motion.
Yeah.
It's easy to use, it's really easy to implement. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, today's live stream is all about how senior developers learn faster and more efficiently and how they basically do what they do. Because I think everyone here has probably at least seen a senior developer on like a YouTube video and be like, holy crap, how do they know all this stuff and learn everything? And, I know people say that inside the web dev incubator, there's, you know, they see us code and they're like, how the heck do you just like pull this shit out of your ass? Basically, is what they all say all at the same
And
time.
before we answer that question, if you're watching this video on YouTube, you should know that we have a thriving Facebook group
We
at
do.
facebook.com/groups/code noobs. You can come join absolutely free. And if you're watching on Facebook, you should know that this is also on every podcasting service. This is also on YouTube. We have a bunch of bonus content on YouTube, like a
Yeah.
whole React for Beginners course, like
Eloquent
me reading,
JavaScript.
Yeah.
yeah, eloquent JavaScript, the famous JavaScript book in audiobook format read by me.
So if
Yeah.
you need like
Your
a nice
sweet voice.
seductive voice,
Yeah.
reading eloquent JavaScript to you at night when you fall asleep, that's perfect option for you guys.
And now
Uh,
as you lie down and close your eyes,
Get ready. I like
values
it.
JavaScript
operators.
slips into your ear.
Let's talk about data structures.
Yeah. Oh man, we are
Nothing gets
so
me going like a
comical.
semicolon.
I know, right? Ah. Hey,
Oh man, so good. Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely join us on YouTube, or if you're, watching on YouTube, join us on Facebook because it's a free community. There's tons of people just like you who are learning to code, who are aspiring developers. You can share your thoughts. You can post in the group, ask questions. We love getting questions in the group. You get, answers from us and other people completely for free. It's just a great community. And it's not like all the other junk that you see out there where it just turns into spam and scam. We really make sure that the group is high quality. We remove people who are spreading any spam or anything like that. So we want to make sure that we retain and really curate this community into something that's high value for you. So, yeah. So, with that, let's get into the topic. I mean, like I said, today's topic is about senior developers, how they learn faster, how they learn more efficiently. And I think, we can just sort of like open it up. What do you guys think are some good tactics that senior developers use to just learn to code
well,
faster?
I was
Go
actually
ahead.
gonna say real quick first though is like one of the reasons why this is also important too, I think is like I mean all the people in the incubator I think have seen this like tech moves fast and you have to be able to like learn new things. You don't know when it's going to be necessary. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've all had this experience, right? You get hired for a job and like they're using something that you might not know. So you just have to figure it out. Otherwise, guess what? You're not going to get that job, right? Or like
Yeah.
you're doing a project and you want to use something. I think there's lots of cases where you just have to like learn stuff on the fly and figure it out. And I think for seniors, I think one of the best things is going to documentation is
Yeah.
important because a lot of I think beginners don't do this. I didn't do it when I first started either, and like it is the best place usually for correct information. Now, some documentation
Yeah.
is terrible, that's true, but most of it's pretty good. And I think going there first and getting confirmation that what you're doing is right is a really good step to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge one that you just touched upon is many times you see junior developers because it's easier and they don't necessarily know how to read documentation yet. They tend to go to other resources like YouTube in particular. I think that's where I think a lot of people go because you can follow along a tutorial, but I think as quickly and that you can actually go and start reading documentation and understand how to read documentation. Because, like you said, it's not all great, but also there's sort of a skill involved with how to digest
Yeah,
documentation.
and it also shows you like what's possible. Because I think that's the other
Yes.
problem. Like if you go to YouTube and just do a tutorial on something, that's great. You might learn the basics, but you still don't know like, well, what's beyond that? You know, what
Yeah.
can I do with this? Is there other thing I know I saw on
I'm
Stack
laughing at
Overflow,
Bryce
right?
because he said Stack Overflow. Yeah, I think
You get the right
if
answer
we were
from
talking maybe
95.
5 to 10 years ago, yeah, I think Stack Overflow would have been an option. But
It's a
um,
mess, dude. Stack Overflow,
yeah,
I don't
you
know.
know,
I
it's
never
funny.
found a good
I
answer.
recently I sold a bicycle that I had to just like some guy on Facebook Marketplace, and he asked me what I did, and I was like, I'm a software developer, and he's like, "Oh, I used to work at Stack Overflow." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." It's like, "What'd you do?" And he's like, "I was on their sales team because apparently they have like a business level, like they sell something." And I was like, "Huh, like so like you worked for Stack Overflow what? Like until ChatGPT came around?" And he was like, "Yeah." Like he was like
Yeah.
so depressed. He was like, "Yeah, I lost my job to ChatGPT." I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
because like it
It's
actually
better.
works."
It
Yeah.
gives you good answers. And like,
Yeah. From like
it,
recent technology.
I remember when we first started, dude, I'd look up stuff on Stack Overflow and like there'd be like 30 answers. None of them were right.
Yeah.
Or
Hmm.
Well,
like,
also,
or it'd
I
be
think
from
one of
like,
the best
they,
features of Stack Overflow is where it says like when this was posted, and they're
yeah.
all like 11, 12,
Yeah.
14 years ago.
And it just doesn't,
So,
well, I mean, I think that's the other thing. I think back in the day, that probably would have been fine for tech when you're talking about like the 60s, 70s, 80s when languages weren't changing. But now it's like things change so fast. You can't
yeah.
rely on something from 2 years ago. I mean, we talk about this a
Yeah.
lot. Even like the large language models, if they're trained on data from 6 months ago, they're not going to give you the right answer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I think
Well,
Randall,
that's
talking
I
about how
see
stuff
something
moves
coming up
so
in your brain.
fast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go for it.
talking about how stuff moves so fast. Danny, you mention this all the time, is getting on the mailing lists
yeah.
of whatever projects you're
Mm-hmm.
working in. So, like, if you're into JavaScript, you might want to get on the next mailing list or Vercel or
Yeah.
different things like that because those are going to be your next steps in JavaScript, and that way you know what's coming out when it's coming out, and you're able to stay abreast of whatever's coming out.
No, that's a really
Mm,
good one. Yeah, because if you go like Google's got their developer list, you can get on Vercel's, all of them, and they give you really good information, and you know what's happening, and it just keeps you informed. I think that's a good idea. You know, staying ahead of like what's happening in the field in general is important.
And similarly, I did also want to mention going to conferences because
yes.
that I think that's one of the best things that you can do. Now, like granted, sometimes the conferences are very expensive to go in person, but most of them are doing virtual nowadays for free.
Yeah.
And but even if you can go, if you can swing it to go in person, or maybe just go to local meetups that do it,
Yeah.
because like every city has like Python meetups and I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know, web
It's a
developer meetups.
great way to meet
So,
people.
mhm. And that's how you get jobs, that's how you make connections, that's how you find somebody to work on your next project with, all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
That's a really good
One of
one. I
the
think
things,
talking to people is important, and just like not being afraid to ask questions too.
yeah,
Mhm.
one of the things that I thought of when I was actually making the topic for this video, which I think is kind of huge, and I think it's overlooked, and it has to do with documentation, right? So we already mentioned that senior developers go to documentation before they're going to go to like a YouTube tutorial, and that's I think part of that has to do with just a confidence level of like I can take on documentation, work through it. But one of the things that I think a lot of people overlook, myself included sometimes, but I think there's a really powerful thing that you see frequently inside of documentation, and that's example code. And I think people overlook that. They're like, I'm just gonna like build it, like I'm just gonna like implement this, right? But a lot of senior developers will actually work through the example code first because it's like a boilerplate project that you can basically use to see how the thing works without the complication of everything else in your project that's interacting with that technology. So, like, I was just recently doing like using auth.js to implement auth in one of my apps, and it makes a lot more sense to read through the example code and even code out the example so that you can just get used to how, like, for example, auth.js works without having the complication of every other page in my app, every other thing that's interacting with that.
No, actually that's something I do a lot, whereas I'll keep a separate window of VS Code open
Yeah.
and I'll use that for if especially when I'm working with new technologies, I'll use that for testing things. And then once I know it works, how it works, then I just implement it. Because you're right, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times if you're going to implement these things, you might need to change 5, 10, 20 files. And if it doesn't work, it's just a waste of time. And then it also makes it a pain in the ass because you gotta go back and fix all this stuff and get back to work. It's like it can be a nightmare, right? You can really clutter up your code. So figuring it out first, then putting it in is always a good practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Randall Lapointe
Right.
says developers have to communicate with
Right.
other humans. Yes,
Well,
they do.
that's the thing that actually separates good senior developers from great senior developers. Because
Yes.
good senior developers have no soft skills, no communication skills, no interpersonal skills, and they all think they're God. They think they're a wizard. And some of them are very good at coding, but they're terrible at working with teams. And while you can do complete projects by yourself, most of the time you have to work with other teams. And so the great senior developers are the ones that not only are wizards on a computer, but also are able to interact with other people.
I'd
Yeah,
also say,
absolutely.
and those that are like also still like excited about it and want to learn more.
Yeah.
Because there's also a lot of senior developers, don't kid yourselves, that are good at one thing and
Yeah.
scared of everything else because they don't want to do that stuff or
Yeah.
they don't feel like it or whatever, and they don't really like. I guess you could say maybe they don't love it anymore doing what they're doing, and that happens, but that's fine. But yeah, I think the really great ones are also ones that are just excited to learn this stuff and see what's coming out and do new things.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about senior developers, definitely. And like one of the things that I've seen frequently with senior developers is the better ones also, like what you were saying, they know how to communicate, but they also know how to like motivate their team too. Because your job as a senior developer, especially if you're like the head of a development team, is you're not necessarily always doing the coding. You're sort of the last look at the code, but your job is to actually motivate a team of mid and junior level developers to create something and provide planning and strategy and those things. So with that, one of the things that I think makes senior developers more efficient and able to learn faster is what you guys have just sort of touched upon, but being able to look at all of the technologies out there and quickly see like what's going to work best for my project. And this is a skill that I know Randall Lapointe had a period where he was going through some of this, and every developer will go through this, where you have a choice to make with something that you're building. Do you want to use Firebase Auth? Do you want to use Next Auth? Do you want to use whatever else it is, right? Are you going to use email login? Are you going to use OAuth? Are you going to, you have a bunch of choices to make as a developer. And I think one of the things that really sets senior developers apart is the way that they're able to quickly, efficiently, and with as much knowledge as possible, make good decisions, right? Because I think junior developers are sort of like, I'm comfortable with what I know, and I'm just going to keep using that. But a lot of times when apps scale up, right, when you have hundreds of thousands of users or you're adding lots of technology to an app, the complexity slows down your app or makes performance worse or creates issues, right? So if you can
Or just
have the
makes development and
foresight,
upkeep and maintenance harder because you have
right,
too many different things going on. Yeah.
right. So like if you can have some foresight of, okay, we're building this, but do we need to have 30 NPM packages for these different things, right? Like I was even thinking about this with my app is I use like an NPM package for carousel and I'm like, do I really need this? And how lightweight is this app or this package? Like, should I be putting this in there, right? Because those are things that down the road, it's like, yeah, it's a carousel that's on the homepage. It looks great, but if it's adding a lot of weight to the app, it doesn't really make sense, right?
Yeah.
So
It,
understanding lots of different technologies and making good choices about which ones to use, I think is very important. And that's something that you have to get by just getting exposure to lots of different apps.
I would say
Do you
too,
guys?
I would also
Yeah,
add too, another thing that you remind me of was like, and I think this is also just like, again, confidence, maybe experience comes into it, but I noticed this myself too, is being able to just start doing something instead of dragging your feet and being afraid, like that fear that holds junior developers back from trying things out or trying to implement something. and then they keep just researching and looking at different alternatives instead of starting.
Yeah.
I think that's also a big one. Like, is it just the confidence that you gain from just doing things and then knowing you can work it out and do it? Like, there's
Yeah.
always going to be a solution. It's just finding it. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of mentality is part of it that makes it easier to learn things and move quicker kind of with the industry.
Yeah. And I think what you just mentioned actually goes really well with what Randall Lapointe mentioned in the comments here. So he said, I did that YC directory project, which is JavaScript mastery, like Next.js tutorial project. And he added Google Auth when the tutorial just used GitHub. So in the tutorial, he walked you through how to use GitHub as OAuth. And Randall was basically saying that he added the Google OAuth as well. Right. And I think this is a good point. So a lot of times we go through a tutorial and we're like, great, did the tutorial, like, done, add that one to the list. But as a junior developer, that's what a lot of junior developers do. But what you should really be doing is expanding on that project. And we talk about this a lot in the group,
Make it
and
your
I know
own.
that, yeah, like I know people talk about this a lot, but I think a lot of times junior developers just really don't do this, which is you have to change something about it, like explore it, mess with things, break things, right? Because that's the learning process comes from breaking stuff and fixing it again. And so if you're just following a tutorial like line for line, code like word for word, you're not actually learning anything because you're not retaining that. You're not working through the problem of it. So I think that's a really important point is like add some extra functionality to everything you build.
That was one of the best things I did early on was I did that for every project I did was I was just especially like, it's things that I didn't build myself like tutorials and stuff. I always added something new. And when I was first starting, one of the best things I did because like I was using GitHub but I wasn't great at it. So I
Yeah.
just copy the entire project, save it in another thing. And that way like I knew like okay, if this doesn't work out, I still have that right there. I can just go back to it. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
that gave me the confidence to try things because I wasn't afraid of well, if this breaks, I'll never be able to get it back, right? Like that
Yeah.
kind of thinking.
So how could somebody do that if they actually know how to use Git and
Yeah, right.
GitHub?
You just make another, you make a new branch, and
Yeah.
this is like when we first started. I'm talking about
No,
way
I
back.
know.
Yeah, but yeah, you just make a new branch, right? And you can just dump it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that's something that, we always talk about is don't be fearful of breaking things. It's actually really good learning practice. So if you have to, just create a new branch, right? Use Git and create a new branch and then change whatever you want. Because if it breaks and you're like, I mean, most of the time that fear is what's irrational, I guess. Like you're not going to break something usually
That's like
so
an
bad
imposter
that it's
syndrome fear. Yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
you
that you
can't
can
go
never
back.
recover.
Yeah, like it's like you're unless you do, Bryce's shirt like sudo rm dash rf, like don't do that because um, you'll just delete your whole operating system and you don't want to do that. But yeah, like most of the time you're not going to do anything that's really going to break an app so bad that you can't recover from it or you can't find the fix to it. And maybe that takes you a long time, but you're going to learn a lot in doing that,
Well,
right?
I do think a lot of it too, what separates like junior and like upper level developers is it's just mindset too. A lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that confidence that like yeah, I'm not gonna break it. I can fix it. If it's doable, it's doable. You can figure it out. And I think
Yeah.
everybody can. It's not, there's not magic. It seems like magic when you're on the user end of stuff, but there is no magic. It's just very simple logic and, implementations to make these things work. So I think
Yeah.
understanding that too helps you like kind of get a better sense of like, you know, what it means to be a developer, I think.
It
Yeah.
could come from a bit of time pressure because a lot of people think that they have to
Mm,
do this as fast as
Oh
possible
God, yeah.
so that they can get the job, make the money, whatever it is. And if they mess up, that's going to derail everything because then it'll take longer and they didn't do it as optimally as possible. And that can be crippling for a lot of people because you miss out on a lot of the good stuff by trying to do it as optimal as possible. Where if you just
yeah.
realize you're going to be a developer for the rest of your life, you have your whole life to figure it out. Because that's generally what most senior developers have done. They just got to a point where they're like, I'm a developer now. Now, it may have come with getting a job, and they're like, well, I just have to show up here 40 hours a week. But it could
Yeah.
also have been they just changed their mind and they decided, I'm a developer. This is what I'm going to do. And so whatever it takes, I'm going to get through it. But not having that time pressure allows you the opportunity to make mistakes.
No, that's like such a good point too, because we've all done that to ourselves so many times. Like that adding like unnecessary time restraints on yourself for no reason. And it
Yeah.
really also makes it you less likely to learn well. During that whole process, you're not actually processing anything. You're just rushing to get it done. And then you're more likely to copy code, cut and paste it, all that stuff that's
Yeah.
going to eventually just, make you not learn as fast.
Yeah. What you guys make me think of too is the difference between learning to learn and learning for curiosity reasons, right? Because senior developers typically just have a lot of curiosity around technology. They're interested in understanding what's happening, why these things work the way they do. Whereas, generally you see junior developers who are like what you just said, where they just have this time pressure, this rush to get a job. They're like, I just need to learn the technology. There's no curiosity there. There's no like interest in what's actually going on, what this translates to, or how this actually functions behind the scenes, right? There's just like, I need to just learn that this does this and this code does that. But yeah, I think there's a huge loss in the curiosity factor. And that's where a lot of learning comes from, right? Is not, I'm just going to do this as quickly as possible so I can get a job. It's like, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. I want to understand what it is, right? So yeah, I have one other one that comes to mind that I think is pretty big, and I've seen this actually quite a bit with senior developers, and it's a little bit dangerous. So I want to like give a warning here. Is this is what senior developers do, but it's not necessarily a recommendation for all junior developers, and that is using AI extensively. Okay, so I've seen senior developers build entire app suites using pretty much exclusively AI, where they're just prompting AI to code something, and then they're just like doing small fixes to the code and then implementing that code. Now, the reason I give warning here is because as a junior developer, um, your goal is, like I just said, to learn and understand what's happening. Senior developers typically understand a lot of this, and they can learn along the way because they can look at the code that's produced by AI and say, like, understand what's happening
They
there,
also
right?
understand the larger picture too, which I think
Right.
is something that does hold a lot of junior developers back, is that you don't have that full picture yet of like how all these things connect and work and all,
Yeah.
which helps.
So with that, I want to just say, like, the way that you would use AI is you absolutely can, and that's one of the best tools that junior developers have nowadays in terms of, the
Oh, you
tools that
can
you can use to
learn
learn.
so
It's
much faster
incredible.
now. It's
Yeah.
insane. Like it's
So, but
absolutely
there's
insane.
there's a caveat with that, right? Is if you're using AI, don't implement code that you don't understand, right? Because it's sort of like installing software that you don't understand what it's doing, right? It can be malicious, it can be it can have bugs all over it, it can not be doing what you actually want. It can, a lot of times it's old code that's less efficient, right? So I know that I've seen plenty of code generated by AI that's like, this is like 5 years old, right? And 5 years old in coding time is like 50 years old,
Well,
might as well be.
well, just for like reference, right? Like even the newest models of ChatGPT, they're trained on at best next, I think maybe 13 or 14. When they
Right.
just implement, they're not trained on the newest models. None of them are on the newest releases. None of that stuff is because there's always going to be a time gap between when they last trained it
Yeah.
and what's happening now.
And I don't think that's necessarily bad to know that stuff. In fact, like I've been reading this book, The Complete Developer, and this week I read through like a lot of the Next.js content. And not surprisingly, it's very old, right? It's actually still using the pages router, which that's very old. I've really never used the pages router in any like production application or anything that I've built, but it was actually kind of interesting. And I think that's a valuable point too, is like learning legacy code is not always bad, right? Because I learned a lot through reading that book, was like how the pages router works, right? So that I can look at old code and understand what's going on because it is different, right? So I think I think that's a good point too, is like you can use AI, you can use different tools like books that are maybe, not as there's some books that are like evergreen. Like you read the JavaScript books, they're not going to change, right? Go ahead,
You
Randall.
know what's really interesting? So like some of the books that I read are from like 2011, you know,
Yeah.
early 2000s to like 2010s.
These are the
And they're all,
romance novels, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They got Fabio on
Fabio.
the cover
He was the
and yeah.
best.
Okay, so anyways, but like but these books are just as applicable today as they were back then.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because they're books on SQL injections. So like
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
dumping SQL databases. They're books on web app security. And it's like the same issues that we had back in 2004 and 2010. They're the
Yeah.
same exact problems that we have today, and they have not been fixed yet.
But you
Why do
know
you
what? You
think
know
that
why?
is?
I have a good reason
Yeah, I'd
here.
love to hear what Danny has to say.
Because at the core, the technology is the same. The hardware is the same. The languages work with
Yeah.
the same hardware. And that's what I think is funny when you realize that it's not that hard to learn new languages because they're all have to do the same tasks. They all have to be able to
Yeah.
do the same things. And I think that's why. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, lots change
I
when it
I
comes to
was gonna
development. We can do a
say,
lot faster, but it's still fundamentally the same thing.
yeah,
It's
I
still,
was gonna say like all these new technologies are just like levels of abstraction away. And so like
yeah,
the core problems still exist. It's just we abstracted higher and higher to
We
the
yeah,
we
point
build a
where like
bigger house of cards.
yeah.
yeah,
But
basically.
it's also crazy because almost all of these like web app vulnerabilities come from mixing data with code. So it's
Mm,
when we have not sanitized user input. So like
mm.
by using parameterized queries or by doing different things like that. But it's the same thing that's been around for 10, 20 years already, but it's just going over and over and over again because it's easy enough to make these mistakes. And generally, if you go to a lot of different learning, a lot of different boot camps, you might not learn it, but it's stuff that we cover in Web Dev Incubator.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great to have a security expert on
Yeah.
board who can teach us all these things because that's one of the best things I think inside the incubator when we're doing something and you're like, let me just show you how these things work
Yeah.
or how your API keys are exposed or how
Cross-site
the
scripting, stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
all these
or
things
just
like
how like you can use Burp Suite to like pull API keys out of an app if they're on the front end. Like there's just a lot of things that I think developers don't understand. I mean, we hear it from all our students too who are in boot camps. We have a couple students who are in boot camps already and get way more value out of the incubator, but they're like, yeah, we're in like week 20 of the boot camp and they just told us not to put API keys like directly in our code
kind of hard
or
code them in. Yeah.
passwords. Yeah, like
You know,
and it's
Mhm.
common though. It's very normal. So,
I think
um,
too, a big part of it too is that, like you also see like a lot of these companies too rush people so much to get stuff out without testing. And that's also why a lot of these security risks still exist because nobody's paying attention to it.
yeah. I'm curious, Donald Sexton in the comments, you said it feels like the same with frameworks, Next.js, Django, .NET. Do you mean that they all feel the same, like in terms of they all are sort of working the same? Or I'm curious what you mean by that. So if you're still watching, throw a comment in
Yeah.
there and explain a little bit more because I'm curious what you're talking about. I'm assuming that you mean all these frameworks sort of feel the same, and it's because they are like they're
Yeah.
all
They,
doing the same thing. They're all abstracting away from just core coding languages, whether that's Python, JavaScript, whatever,
all these
HTML.
frameworks just make it possible to develop faster and more
Yeah.
efficiently because they handle some of the crap for you basically that you would have to do otherwise. But they're not fundamentally changing stuff. Yeah, the functionality. Yeah, they are functionally the same because the languages
Yeah.
are. Yeah. And they're
Yeah,
doing this.
exactly.
And it's still going to get interpreted into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at the
And
end of the
and
day.
and then interpret it into binary, right?
Yeah.
Like even between languages like JavaScript and Python and C, they're all going back to binary.
Yeah.
So at the core, there's only so many things. Like there's only really logic gates, at the core. So yeah, it does feel the same for a lot of these. And that's why you hear a lot of developers say, once you understand one language, it's pretty easy to jump into a different language. I mean, I have done a lot of Python programming in my life, but it's not what I do now. And I was able to help Bryce yesterday with his issue with the path just because I understand how like I don't understand exactly how Python imports work, but I could just look at his code and be like, yeah, that's not, calling the path to that file is not correct, right?
I
Because
want
it's all
to,
the same.
yeah, I
Yeah.
want to add one other thing too is for anybody that's like trying to learn this too, and if you want to get to that, I think senior level faster is read error codes all the time when you get them.
Yeah.
Like actually use developer tools if you're developing web apps. Check your errors that are thrown and actually look them up and start understanding them so you can read what these errors are because that is one of the most important things when you're debugging for getting your projects to work right and function is to learn how to read error codes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Well, we are at 35 minutes. If
Yeah,
anybody's watching and you know something that we missed, because I'm sure there's other things out there, like we're not comprehensive in our
in 30 minutes.
yeah, in 30 minutes, but if there's anything that you felt like we missed or some advice that you could give to other people, drop it in the comments. We are a community here. We want everybody to learn together. So drop a comment, whether you're on YouTube or in Facebook watching this. Let us know what you think is a great strategy for learning faster, more efficiently, and just becoming a better developer. And with that, if you want to become a better developer, we have an amazing group. It's called the Web Dev Incubator. It's a private sort of inner circle community with, some of the developers that you're seeing comment frequently in these videos because they're very motivated. They're very committed to this idea of becoming a developer. And if that's what you want, we want the same thing for you. We want to help you become a better developer. We want to help you on your journey to become that developer. And that's what our program is all about. We do live coding in the program. We give you 24/7 access to us so that you can communicate with us. You can ask us questions. You can get help. Yeah, we have about 15 in the group now. And we're adding to that, right? So if you guys would like to just book an action call with us. We'll drop the link below, or you can just DM us directly, and we'll be happy to schedule that for you. Also, up on the top inside the Facebook group in the featured section, there is a link to that. It's in the you typed yes to wanting details about how to launch your career. That's where the link is to create that action call. And the action call, there's no pressure. It's literally just a call to give you some free mentoring, some free advice, and tell you a little bit more about the program, see if it's a good fit for you. If it is, awesome. We'll help you get inside of it. If it's not, no big deal. You can just stay in the group, absolutely free. Come hang out with us every Saturday morning for these awesome calls. If you are inside the Web Dev Incubator, we'll see you in about 20 minutes. We're going to take a
And one
short
more
break.
thing.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And if you're looking to get into frameworks as soon as possible, because companies nowadays hire people who know how to use frameworks like Next.js.
Yes.
So if you're looking to get hired ASAP, reach out to one of us because we're putting together a week-long intensive course. It's going to be in
Yeah.
person. And those are pretty much all the details we're giving at this point. But by the time you're done that course, not only will you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but you'll also be up to speed in Next.js and
Which
ready
is a
to get
full
going.
stack.
Yeah.
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 Full stack.
Yeah.
So you're going to understand how to develop full stack applications, which is like, if you want to learn how to code and you want to make money, because that's what I can guarantee pretty much everybody who gets into coding wants to do, you need to learn full stack development. If you're
Oh,
just
full
learning
stack's
front end or
essential, I
back
think.
end,
Yeah.
you're crippling yourself and you're just gonna be asking for less pay. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you
But
off.
we're putting it together right now. It's going to be a week long. We're limiting the number of people who we accept to it just because this is the first time we're doing it. But by the end of it, you will be able to make money as a developer. You will be able to get hired wherever you'd like to. So if you're interested, reach out to any of us on Facebook and yeah, we'll give you some more information.
Yeah, this week actually I'm going to put together two things. One is just a questionnaire to get a little bit of information from the group about what you like to see inside that program, and other things like what time of the year would be the best for you, things like that. And the second thing is I'm going to set up just a like early access form so you can put your email in there and get updates on that. So if you are interested, you can just join that mailing list and you'll be the first to know when we actually do release that to the public.
And
So
updates on it as we get it worked out. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So with that, thank you guys for tuning in for this another Saturday. We've been doing this for over a year now, so that's pretty cool. Every single Saturday, and the three of us, have been meeting for like 4 years now, I think,
Years.
at least,
Yeah.
which
Over
is
that, yeah, I think now. Yeah.
yeah, which is pretty cool. And everybody inside the web dev incubator has been meeting with us every Saturday and Tuesday for months and months now. So pretty cool. And like, if you guys are curious, just like post in the group, ask like, what's your experience with the incubator? Because you'll see the people who are in here get so much value out of this group. And they'll tell you straight to your face that it's the best decision they ever made. Even the people who are in other boot camps will be like, this is absolutely the best thing I've ever done. And it's because we're not trying to steal your money. We're actually trying to provide value for you. So with that, thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll see you next Saturday for another live stream. And yeah, enjoy your Saturday, November 23rd. And happy Thanksgiving
Happy
also,
Thanksgiving.
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Everybody.